Hey guys, this will be video 10 for the how to restore a 69 Gibson SG, or probably any era SG for that matter. Once you get the neck pocket under control, and I'll do a brief recap if you're just tripping up on this video series, because there's a whole lot going on here that you can see from the first video. But this is a 69, and this is called the Dark Walnut. And I had initially made the statement, I don't know, this thing might have been cherry and somebody refinished it. But it's funny, I didn't consider the fact that you can always look into the control cavity, and whatever you see there going on with the color and or the stain, it's very likely that that's what the guitar was originally, because I don't know anyone who's going to like change a guitar that's from cherry or white or black to walnut, and then they come in and do that to the interior. So that's why this guitar initially started out as like, well, we're going to do an SG standard restoration. And then the more research that I had done, and I was talking to the client about, I said, I think this thing may have very likely been a custom, meaning the block inlays, but also a custom ordered custom guitar, meaning it only had two pickups. And the client is the one that made me aware of all this stuff, because I was playing a lot of catch up with regards to specs and all that jazz, only to discover that, man, there were just a myriad of changes from 61 to all through the 70s, and I think even like in the middle of the year in certain years, it was kind of hit or miss. But anyway, long story short, Eric, I'll go ahead and address this with you. I got your message about possibly would I route those out for you? And I got to shoot straight with you. I don't want to, just because of a structural standpoint. I really fear this thing. If I come in here, even if I do real precise machine work, I'm really fearful that we're going to start running into getting way too thin issues. However, if you hear me out for a second, you can go with, oh great, you can go with the short leg pickup, and then that very likely will fit in. And I don't want to spend much time in the video, trying to engineer on the fly. But I've even come in and snap the legs off of a pickup. And then just like you see that little wood there, and I swear that wasn't planned, but just like you see that little board right there, you could epoxy a flat bar across it, real thin material, and then tap it out. And therefore, probably, yeah, I know you could. See that right there? You could actually do either possibly get away with a short leg humbucker that would fit in there with no machine work required. What's going on at the pickup, the pick guard, is irrelevant. And it just is, whether it's the bat wing style or if it's you did a mahogany fill-in up here and turn this into a three pickup custom or something like that received the single pick guard. So sky's the limit, but I say let's stay away from doing any route work to this body, and not because I'm lazy, but just because I know better than to cut into something like this, because the whole premise of this restoration was to spend an enormous amount of time tiptoeing around all of this historical work. And if I had have thought that you were cool about doing stuff like that, I probably would have done all this completely differently. I would have just come in here and epoxied a board in here, and might have even just considered routing out this swimming pool and epoxying in a solid piece of 100 mahogany, and then machining out for the three pickups, and therefore really, really increasing the strength and the tone of this guitar body. But since we've done all of this work right here, in order to preserve the whole historical aspects of this guitar, I say let's keep it in check, because there are definitely things you can do right here related to your pickup in order to turn it into a three pickup guitar without having to do route work. Okay, so I'm not being difficult, or I'm not being, and I know Eric knows me enough by now. We've had plenty of conversations. He knows I'm not lazy about any of this work, and I want to do a really good job. But also, know when to say, well, I guess just know when to say no. No, that's not a good idea. I think that would be a mistake. So let's heat on the side of caution and go from there. Okay, what I'm going to cover in this video is primarily going to be talking about this fretboard and the finish work that I did there in order to get it to this point to where I can now glue it to the fretboard lower. I mean the fret lower. The neck lower, or do all the headstock. And I got the headstock overlay over here where once I pull it out of this jig, I should be able to spend quite a bit of time in this video talking about this headstock overlay and the different paths that you could take in order to do the overlay. Because I misspoke in the last video where I've said, yeah, you know, I got a lot of stain work to do to this before I glued the fretboard down. I don't know where the hell that came from, because that's the most basic thing any guitar builder knows, that when you're doing any sort of artificial finish, I'm talking about color. I'm not talking about clear coat. You can get away with doing just clear coat, but I've got quite a bit of shape work to do rolling this binding. See, your binding is always, let me just push it up. The binding is about 60 thousandths wider than the fretboard right now. Than the lower. So all this is going to get glued down first and then shaped to the neck. And then you would be able to, and once you're truly finished with all your shape work, shaping your binding to the lower, then you're ready to do stain work, literally like with a soft cloth and dark stain, and start staining up to a color, and then letting that dry, and then beginning to shoot really thin coats of a nitro, sealing that color. And don't worry if you miss your color a little bit. If anything, you would want to, if you get lucky and match them up on the front end, that's awesome. And I think really dark colors are much easier to work with by far than light colors. So, but I would say don't go in too dark, because if you go in too dark, even if you're just doing clear coats atop that, it will even get just ever so slightly darker. So I would say, if anything, when I'm doing my stain work, I'm going to try to hit a target of about 80 to 85% within that color, which is just about black right in here. So I should be fairly safe. But then when I'm shooting my very final last coats of lacquer, well, that's not true. When I start shooting my clear coat over the stain, then I'll start tinting with my brown mahogany. It's actually the lacquer. And then I'll start spraying until I see the guitar, the neck lower, begin to really complement and match the body and whatnot. And that goes all the way back to video 1, 2, and 3, where I was talking about how, I really think it would be wise if we just did the 3-piece neck, matched this stain, kept it all historically accurate and all that jazz. The only thing I did deviate from was I talked him into doing that. I didn't have to talk to him. I just showed him the pictures and he went for it. But we went with I call this Australian gold. That's not true. This is harvested out of the Philippines. So this is Filipino mother of pearl, which I don't know if the Australian gold, I don't know if you can get the gold from Australia, but you can get the Australian white. But anyway, I'm hitting everything from like 1,000-foot view here, but definitely going full circle. We're staying very close to historically accurate, but wherever I am deviating, I'm making certain that I deviate in a consistent fashion and a complementary fashion. So the order of the operations now are kind of down to like 4 big jobs. The first job I would say would be finish the headstock overlay 100%, whether it's on the lower or whether it's separate once we pull it out of this jig over here. If you've never done binding work before, I would say definitely do the overlay completely 100% off of the guitar, because any mistakes you make, you don't want glue dripping down on a body, or even, or you don't want an X-Acto knife slipping and coming across, like say you were cutting all this with an X-Acto knife, and if you slip, that's difficult to cover. So not being melodramatic there, it's just I learned my lessons from like 25, 30 years ago when I started doing binding, where it's really best to just do all that type stuff in component form, and then you're ready to glue that component down, even so much so that you're already cutting your overlay on that pitch to meet the 14 degree. It's basically either you could look at it as from the standpoint it's either a 76 degree or it's a 14 degree cut. When I'm setting up my miter saw, I'll be cutting it 14 degrees. And in case I forget, I want to make that 14 degree cut before I start doing all this shape work. When it's still S4S or rectangular, I can then trust a straight line on my overlay to go to my miter saw and cut that 14 degree. But that 14 degree cut will be based on a certain finish dimension right here. So you see how, and even making certain that you keep all your binding thicknesses and stuff. So you're literally, when you're at this point, this component, when you're ready to glue it down, you want it to be pretty much 100%, if not 99% finished. So you're just doing very minimal scraping and blending from the binding that is around that overlay in order to the wood right here, as well as you're doing this, just as I just mentioned on the fretboard, as you're doing all, as you're getting ready to now glue this down and then do all this shape work, and all this wood is still raw. And if any glue or any crap gets on it, you want to wipe it with your lacquer to make certain you keep it very clean, because if you have some sort of funky little blotch right there and then you start doing your stain work later on, you get in trouble. So going full circle, as I was trying to finish, I've got the job down to basically 4 different jobs now, if not 5 maybe, not considering the electronics. But the headstock overlay, pretty much close to 100% finished, then glued down. Well, we'll just call it operation. Well, no, we'll call it operation 1, doing the fretboard, the headstock overlay, then gluing it down, and then based on the 19th fret location, which that is a defining point along our speaking length. So as long as we're leaving enough room, and we already know which nut we're going with. Okay, so we already know we're holding the nut in our hand here that we're actually going to be installing. So now you can add the thickness of that nut to the top of the fretboard. Okay, and then go down to the 19th fret location, which I'd be willing to bet Eric's guitar, that's it right there. Is that right? Yeah, 19, 20, 21, 22. Yeah, I almost gave your guitar away, Eric. So the 19th fret location right there, whatever that dimension is there, it's irrelevant, because now all we're doing, I'm not saying it's irrelevant, it is irrelevant. It is not irrelevant. It's very much relevant, but it's just based on where we glue this fretboard down. And then from the 19th fret to the center of the studs right there will determine the other side of the speaking length or the scale. And then that will start defining points up here that will define, that nut location, which now will define the bottom edge of where the overlay gets glued in. But then since the overlay is cut on a 14 degree angle, it will verify that once this overlay is glued down, the fretboard is glued down. When I slide this nut in, I should be able to turn this guitar over and it hang. It will not fall out if I did an exceptional job, because you do not glue the nuts in. Most people think you glue them in and you make them real stiff. You don't. Not on a 3x3 sided neck, because you want to have this such that a true luthier shop is able to change that over to a brass. And as far as like if I'm a player, sometimes I want to loosen the tension on, and I put a brass nut in there and play it for a while. And then sometimes I'm more interested in the bone nut or the tusk. So, but keep in mind, you'll have to, machine that to receive certain thicknesses, or you'll have to machine whatever's the thinnest material, which is typically going to be the bone. You would have to machine your brass nut down to slide in there. Okay, so a lot of moving parts, as I say, but also going full circle, as I continue to say, back to 3 or 4 different jobs. finishing the headstock overlay, gluing the headstock overlay down, or epoxy gluing it down. I will not be using any tight bond at all on any of this glue down. And there's a possibility, I'll talk to Eric and let him know it's his call. But if this were my guitar and I'm truly building it to be a player and I'm a mature player, that I'm not going to be dropping this guitar no more than I would be dropping my sister's baby if she handed it to me. I'm going to be very responsible with this. I probably would epoxy glue this fretboard down. Why? And I'll show you in a minute if I can. Once the just to avoid the possibility of a rubber gasket. Now the tight bond is fine. It's fine. It's fine. Don't work with epoxy if you don't know what you're doing and you've never done it. But I most certainly would really kind of like to epoxy this fretboard down. Therefore, the fretboard will be epoxied down. The headstock overlay that we built up is epoxied down. Even if we came in here and machined off another 1/16 of an inch of the back of this in order to get the proper thicknesses of 5/8 of an inch here, 9/16 of an inch finished here, then we still have one of the strongest SGs ever built. We're already made the determination that we're going to be epoxying the neck into the body. So imagine for a moment the tonal bliss that's going to be achieved with a guitar that's 100% epoxy glued together. It's going to be off the charts, even if I could put this down with tight bond. But as I'd mentioned in some of the past videos, airplanes are not designed and built to be crashed. They're designed to be flied. And same thing with guitars. I have dropped one SG once, but I was a kid. But after that, I've never dropped a guitar, ever. I've had them kind of fall over on the couch a little bit. But when you've got a guitar of this caliber, or any guitar for that matter, I think you should treat it with respect and realize that, you know, Gibson might get a little bit of a bad rap about, oh, Gibson just can't figure out how to get their headstock. No, they don't design the damn things to handle being dropped on a concrete floor. That's your fault. If you drop your guitar and you break the headstock off, don't go on the forums and throw Gibson under the bus because they didn't design their guitars to be broken or thrown down on the floor. They designed them to be played. However, I think the epoxy would make it far superior in strength, but it's not so much the strength that I'm after as much as it is the tone. And I think I'll go ahead and show it just so I don't forget, because I'm kind of wound up here. Here's some epoxy that I mixed up, I don't know, a week or so back when I was doing some sort of work. But if and whatever thickness that is, it's probably about 1 millimeter. You're not gonna have that sort of thickness requirement anywhere in a guitar. Okay, but my reasoning is, you heard the snap, and anything that will snap is going to carry tone better. Whereas if you glue these two pieces of material together with a tight bond, I don't care how long you left it clamped, you can come back at any time and you can get all the flex in the world you want out of the tight bond. There's nothing wrong with that. That's fine. But if you glue this maple veneer overlay atop a maybe a 16 or maybe less, it'd be 3/32 of an inch roughly mahogany, which I'm about to pull out. So that's epoxy down. And then that gets epoxy to your headstock overlay. Well, you just heard the snap, crackle, pop of that. And it's so strong, man. You have to really get a grip on it to break it. So that's my reasoning behind working with the epoxy. But the only reason I was able to get that snap is because I know the proper ratio to mix the hardener to the resin. And if you want it to snap like that and be real brittle, then you need to mix your epoxy with about 10% less hardener than what is called for in your traditional 1-to-1 ratio. If you want it to be more elastic, like if you're building a boat or an airplane or something like that, that you want it to have the ability to flex a little bit, then you want to do the 1-to-1 ratio with your epoxy, or maybe just a little bit more hardener according to what it is that you're building, according to excuse me, how much flex it is that you want. Okay. Okay, so I spent a lot more time. I mean, I'm really serious. I had no intentions of just spending that much time just going off on a tangent. But sometimes when you're going off on a tangent like that, you're able to just hit a whole bunch of different points that are really critical. And just based on like the last 30 years of either attempting to build something, attempting to work with something, or possibly reading about something online, that sometimes it's legit and sometimes it's BS, that you have to wade through that pool as well. But so, three or four different jobs. The headstock overlay glued to the neck lower. The fretboard is finished, ready to be glued down, nice and flush on the bottom. So job number 3, and then after that, epoxied into the body. Or you could, once this overlay is on here, which this is probably the route I will take. Once the overlay is on here and I'm through doing any sort of tabletop router machine work, where I'm doing all that machine work and not having a guitar body hanging up here, then I'll go ahead and epoxy this in. Yeah, I can just about guarantee this is the way it's going to get built. Then this will get epoxied in. The headstock overlay is finished. All the binding is beautiful, comes up to a point. It's cut on a 14-degree angle. And then we're ready to install the fretboard. But hear me out and read between the lines. Don't read into this that I'm talking about building a shoddy guitar. But if you've got some sort of issue going on with a guitar like you've got right here, where, and I've complained about this and I've explained to Eric, please don't think I'm whining and complaining, but I've never ever seen a 19th fret location that narrow. It's almost like a child's guitar. It's been kind of nightmarish figuring out how to work around that. So when it comes down to installing this fretboard at the 19th fret location, there is a very, very strong possibility that it's going to be shifting, just not even a 64th of an inch in one direction, in order to make certain that we'll just call it the center line, the center line from the nut hits at the center line of the bridge. And there's nothing wrong with, from an exaggeration, I wasn't planning on that much, but I'll go ahead and exaggerate. There's nothing wrong with letting your fretboard hinge at the nut location and either swing a little bit to the treble side or swing a little bit to the bass side. I'm talking a 64th of an inch. I'm not talking a 16th of an inch. If you're in that realm right there, you really screwed up fitting this lower to that. I'm not being a smart, what. I'm just saying, think through that job. Fortunately, this job, I've already got all of that stuff machined out, and it would be very, very safe for me to just put this dead on center right here. And please read between the lines. Understand what I'm saying. Do not hinge from down here and start shifting up here, because now you're going to be putting the truss rod in a twist. You want to be hinging from the nut location, and if you have to do just a very, very micro shift to one direction in order to put that center line with the center line of the bridge, then there's nothing wrong with that, because what it comes down to, if this is in a perfect world, in a guitar that has the appropriate width, and we're talking at least a 16th of an inch wider is what it really should be, then you can plan on this flushing up, and it's a beautiful, perfect world. But with this guitar, I'm probably going to be hanging over a little bit and then anticipating the thickness of the lacquer buildup, as well as I call it a little bit of trickery, where I'm saying, if it's okay for me to shape this into the lower up here, well, then what's wrong with me doing a little bit of a taper work back here just to kind of make it all blend together? But please understand, your nitrocellulose lacquer, especially if it is tinted with color, if you spray 7, 8, 10, 15, 20 coats of that, I can assure you there's a mil thickness there, and it will start filling in. Again, Please read between the lines. I'm talking about just barely being able to catch your fingernail on the overhang. But please understand, if you flush that out perfectly flush with your finished binding, and then you put tape across there and come in here and spray 15 or 20 coats, when you remove that tape, uh, you, you're going to be shocked at how much of a drop there is. You'll feel it, and you'll be trying to feather in to make it work. Or either you'll be taping down here and taping up here and spraying a skunk stripe of nitro in here to try to get it under control. So just, read between the lines. So anyway, so I guess that was job number 4, the headstock overlay glued to that. Job number 2, this is already finished, so this would be job number, well, as I said, glued into there, job number 3, and this glued down, job number 4. Now we can install our frets. Okay. And how would you do that? I'm just going to keep talking hypothetically here, because if you're a true guitar builder or you're a restoration type guy, I don't even have to show you what it is I'm talking about. You can just hear me talking about this and read between the lines. But I'll go ahead and do a quick mock-up here, and we'll push it back a little bit. Okay, so let's say that was let's say the lower was epoxied or tight bond glued into the body. There's nothing wrong with tight bond as long as you got a really good fit and you're really fast and precise with your work. And I'm getting ready. Let's say it's a perfect world. I'm flushing out perfectly up here at the nut location. I'm perfectly on center and everything's getting glued in. Perfectly flush back there based on the end of that. And then I'm able to just glue it all in. And you want to have a caul, C-A-U-L, a clamping caul that looks basically identical to like a fretboard, but I do this from time to time, but only about this amount right here, not much. If anything, you want to guarantee that you have like a strip of material like that all the way down the side, on this side, and then all the way down on this side. In other words, like a little runner, 2 little runners that guarantees that when you do clamp this, that you're clamping down on the outside. Because I have seen fretboards kind of bow up like that. So that, what'll get you in trouble if you're only just putting a straight edge right down the middle. It'll press all the glue or epoxy out in the middle, but it won't squeeze out any of that. And it seems strange that it could happen, but apparently this stuff can bow a little bit. So when you're using your clamping caul, C-A-U-L, you want to make certain that that clamping caul is such that when you put it atop your fretboard and you're clamping down the center, well, it's distributing 90% of all the clamping force out on the outside. Okay, and then it's going to turn into a guitar really fast after that. Okay, but the worst thing that could happen is if well, I won't talk about horror stories, but because if you've spent this much time, you're going to know the importance of guaranteeing that you don't just put this up here and start loading it full of clamps, especially if you're working with epoxy, because that stuff will creep. It'll creep at like 2 hours later. You'll come back and this will have moved. So when you're doing epoxy work, you got to stay with whatever project it is that you're epoxying and truly monitor everything to make certain that you don't have creep. But if you have creeping with either tight bond or epoxy, then you got too much glue in there, or you got too much epoxy, especially with the tight bond. If I was doing this with a tight bond and gluing this down, and I'm working out some of the the tight bond a little bit, all of a sudden I'm going to feel it within about 10 to 15 seconds. It's getting ready to kick on, I guess on a molecular level, and kind of go ahead and start setting or tacking, as they call it. Then once you get it to that location, then you're ready to clamp it down, and then start taking a washcloth and washing off any of the squeeze out. And it's very therapeutic to work with the tight bond because it's very clean. You don't have to panic about getting crap all over you and you're sticky and you're trying to keep your hands clean. But I worked with epoxy enough now that I can just about do a job like that and not even get anything on me. But where I was going, I apologize, I digressed there a little bit. But if you're not in that perfect world, you're definitely hinging from this location, the center of the nut location up here, and then you might be shifting the fretboard ever so slightly, maybe a 64th of an inch that way, or maybe a 64th of an inch that way in order to get your guitar under control. But I can assure you, I've already done all of this dry fitment and whatnot and clamped up. And I've even, the reason I brought it up is you can actually go ahead and install two tuners up here, and you don't necessarily have to have like a low E string and a high E string. You could just have, typically the thinner the string, the safer it is, but you could actually go ahead and just put a clamp up here. This is all dry. This is where you're doing your dry fitting. Put all this together and dry fit it and put a clamp in the middle. Go ahead and put the bridge on there and some sort of temporary tail by which you can string up the two E strings, and then go ahead and run them over the nut location. Come up here with a clamp, like a little C clamp that's just a ginger kiss. Then remove this clamp down here enough that you can shift the fretboard up under the trapezoidal path of the strings, and then you can find what's truly perfect as far as the overhang from the treble side and the overhang from the bass side. Okay, so read between the lines. That's if you're working with a historical body where you don't want to start getting down here and relocating studs and stuff like that, because as I've covered in past videos, you start moving this stuff right here. Well, now you screwed up the relationship to where your pickups are in relation to this historical location here. In other words, you made a mistake on your neck lower installation, and now you're trying to make up for it by moving items down here. You don't want to do that, but there's nothing wrong with shifting that fretboard down there just a very small amount. Read between the lines, as I've already said, maybe a 64th of an inch. If you're having to move a 32nd of an inch, that's getting pretty extreme, because if you're moving a 32nd of an inch here, man, you're swinging quite a bit in order to travel a 24 3/4 of an inches, if that makes sense. That ought to make perfect sense. Just over the whole rise over run thing. The more it runs, the more the rise increases, and the longer that run is, the less rise that is required. And this would be, this would be the run, and then this would actually be the rise. So, it's just basic geometry, of course. So wow, I'm gonna have to go take a nap now, because that's exhausting just going off the top of my head with all that information. But let's get back on to just looking at things that are in front of us, and like looking at the pictures. Let's just look at the pictures for a while. And there's a part of me, it's like, oh man, I almost regret going with this gold mother of pearl, because it does not photograph, it does not capture on video or camera. And one guy made a statement, oh, I really like the yellow block. And I know it's not you guys, because several guys have said, oh, wow, that's really cool. I've never seen the yellow. They're not yellow. I can assure you. I'm not being a smart ass. I'm just saying that they don't photograph very well, because as I'm looking at this in the light, this would be like images that would be in the book of Revelation, where, angels are coming out of the clouds and whatnot. I mean, it's just really beautiful. And I think which one would be Jesus returning? It probably would be this one right here, believe it or not. So that it's amazing when you're looking into these, all of a sudden you'll turn into the light, and there's one that I had turned upside down. I'm not kidding you, man. It looked like, yeah, it is that one. When I'm looking into that one on this angle, I have no idea what you're seeing, but it, honest to God, looks like I'm about 30,000 feet up, and I'm looking across the Himalayan mountains, and it's like the sunset's over here. It's just beautiful, the imagery. And unfortunately, I know I will have to move real slow so you might could pause the camera. But I know probably what's going on right now. Every one of these are looking yellow. They're not yellow. They're gold, and they're really beautiful. They're almost like a like a blonde, like a blonde girl, like a girl with blonde hair. It's like just really beautiful blonde. So, but when you look at it against the Australian white, I definitely see your point and like, oh yeah, they're yellow. They probably are in relation to that, but nonetheless, they're really beautiful. And how did I get here? I'm scared to look at the timer, but what are we? Is that 35 minutes or 25 minutes? I think that is 35 minutes. All right. You need to invest in your Sheffield from Clifton Scrapers from Sheffield, England. And to all the guys from the UK that watch, I really appreciate you chiming in from time to time, and really appreciate the knowledge that I've gathered from a lot of you guys that are pro guitar builders over there that have chimed in. And I've got some guys that have chimed in from Brazil, and from time to time it helps me learn how to pronounce what we would call um, uh, Pafero in the States. This one guy, his name is Marco, who told me that it's pronounced Pafijo. So it's pretty cool when these international cats chime in. But I've been using the Clifton Scrapers made in Sheffield, England for about 30 years. And this is only the second set that I've had to buy. And as I showed you in the last video, I had the construction paper on the bottom of this when I glued these on each side, put them in a clamp overnight, held them nice and straight, and then all I did was just come back. And I had a block of wood on the table that extended up to about that point right there, clamped on that side, and I just pressed into this, and then I put another block down here on the table and just kind of let it cradle in between these two blocks, and then I'll just use can't use the guitar. But then I just took my scraper and I just came across here and cutting off the binding, and it's just scrolling off like cotton candy, and you have to make certain you really be real cautious. Don't get too much of a gully down here and leave a lot of mass up here. Every now and then you're going to want to pull it out and push in that direction to kind of get it off. But I found that pulling by far works best. And let's see if I can put that on the table with this white construction paper. Okay, so you see all I'm coming up with is just a very small amount of the material, and believe it or not, there is just a very small amount of the ABS there. So what does that mean? I've got a 100% bar none, ready to rock and roll binding fitment on the sides once it glues down with the epoxy or tight bind. It's irrelevant, doesn't matter, because even if there was, when I say a gap, I'm talking 1/2 of 1/1000th of an inch or something like that, the lacquer and the stain and all that jazz is going to conceal anything. But that was the most important fit, getting that fit first, because you have to get your bottom perfectly flat. And I don't trust this tabletop as far as flatness. After I got it to that point, now I'm working off of just something that I trust that's perfectly flat. And whether I clamp it up here or I don't clamp it up here, or all I do is just have some sort of blocking. I'm only going to talk about this briefly, but just please understand, if this has radius to it, whatever that radius is, it is so important that the radius continues on the top of your binding. It has to, because the way I'll be doing my frets, let me grab a fret. When I'm doing my fret work, see, your tang is obviously flush with the end wherever you snipped it, so you're going to have to cut the tang back, whatever overhang you have, and file it down, but make certain that you don't file it into the actual fret itself. So Stuart McDonald makes this little tool. It's called a tang nipper, and I've never used them. I never saw the benefit in doing that because I've got a little jig that I designed that actually I can stick the fret in like that, and then I just file from the underside, pull it out, and look at it, stick it back in, file a little bit more, then change over to a micro fine file and do the final wash work. So in other words, what happens is there's a little bit of an overhang there, and most guys are going to freak out. They're going to think, oh wow, then that's going to guarantee that you have a real a finger catcher, and it's always going to be hanging up and stuff like that. Yeah, it will if the whomever installed the frets does not know what they're doing. But if you've done this enough, this is the way it was done back in the probably 30s, 40s, 50s on all the true pro jazz guitars. And once you roll that binding up and you roll into this fret end, you don't need fret nibs. You don't need that crap. If you do an exceptional job, and then if someone like me is evaluating a guitar that was a custom built guitar, and I see stuff like that where the fret is actually hanging over, and then I play it and it feels like a $20,000 jazz guitar, well, I know that guitar was built by someone who knew exactly what they were doing. It's an enormous amount of work, and I'm not saying it just to get attention or anything like that, but it usually takes me about 2 nights to do all my fret work. After I had this on the guitar and it's ready to receive the frets, it takes about 2 nights of just sitting there in total silence and just focusing on doing one fret at a time. Or at a minimum, I go ahead and machine them and install them. Machine them, machine it, install it, machine it, install it. And then I'll machine it. Ah, shit, I got too short. Well, then I move down to the shorter location. Machine it, install it, machine it, install it. Get to the next one, and oh crap, I machined that one too far. Well, move it down. So if you start from the long end and work in this direction, then by the time you get down there and you've had one or two mistakes where you machined them a little too far, you just moved it down here and you just snipped off the ends. Okay. And then I typically like to install the frets dry. I used to epoxy them in and then install them, but I don't do that anymore. I go ahead and install everything dry, and then I come back after I've got the guitar set up and playing really nicely, because sometimes I might have made a mistake and hammered one blow too strong and it's a little bit low. I want to be able to lift that fret back up a little bit. Then after I've got it playing really good, I remove my strings. Then I do my CA glue, and I CA glue them in, and with a razor blade clean all the residue off, and then oil it, and it is a phenomenal sounding and playing guitar. Okay, it's one of those things I could show you, but it would take hours just to show you how I do just one fret. But just by talking about it, if you'll just get at your table, you'll start. What is it they call it? The necessity is the mother of invention. You'll start determining. Okay, well, I need something that'll hold that fret while I file it off. Well, then you just design a little thing there that can be clamped to the edge of your other table, and then you're letting that fret hang over, and you're filing off the bottom. And how do you keep that fret from moving? Well, you take your fret saw and you cut a fret slot right there. And go ahead and cut 2 or 3 other slots in there as well, because you might have different stages where you do your rough filing in this fret slot, then you move to or maybe you do your rough filing back here, and then you move up here, and then finally once you're up here, then you're doing your real sweet precision fitting where you definitely have to make certain that these fret tangs are just barely kissing the edge of the binding in there. I'm not saying, and please read between the lines, don't allow your fret tang to be hanging back here any distance at all. You do not want this fret, just the fret top itself, overhanging more than just maybe a 32nd of an inch after it's all said and done, because you'll be rolling that binding in. You do not want that fret hanging over anything over a 32nd of an inch. You do that, you do run the risk of like somebody's shirt, they reach their shirt, might catch it and then literally rip the fret out if it had sprung a little bit. So again, read between the lines. Let me check the time. 44 minutes of probably some of the most valuable information on eBay. Okay, what else? As I promised, let's pull this. Let's pull this out of the clamping system here. I'll leave these on the table and I'll just get them off. I like having two different cauls, C-A-U-L-S, because those two cauls together allowed me to look through my wax paper and verify that my center line on my black overlay was in fact staying on line with the marks or indentions that I had made on the mahogany below it. And I've had this board since I was about 11 years old. This is some of my first table saw work that I ever did, where I was doing bevel work. And that's what I've talked about in one of the past videos. I can't believe Dad used to let me do that stuff on the table saw. But piece of walnut makes for an incredible clamping caul. Keep everything nice and true. I don't think I will forget, but in case I do, wherever you're doing mother of pearl, drill some relief holes in the back so that the epoxy can squeeze out. Otherwise, if you get a little bit too much epoxy in there, then it will create a puddle and it'll create a hump. But if you do the drill out, that will guarantee that once you do all this nice clamp work, that it will squeeze out, and it did just that. Better to have a little bit too much epoxy if you have the, it's kind of like a, what do they call it, injection molding. It's like a reversed injection molding. It's like an exit molding. We'll call it exit molding. So that it's better to have a little bit too much epoxy, just a small amount too much, so that when you do squeeze it out, you're guaranteed that from a tonal standpoint and a strength standpoint, it's 100% epoxy under your tape. Okay, so let me get the table cleaned up a little bit. And we'll look at what's in front of us. I may have to pause just to guarantee that I don't make any mistakes, but if you're watching a video like this, you're really interested in seeing things materialize. 47 minutes. I should be able to get all this covered in about 1 hour. First time I've seen it. Looking good. Most important thing here. Oh, thank God. Yeah, perfect. Very nice and flush. So keeping in mind that we've got a whole week's worth of black nitrocellulose lacquer atop the maple, and then or like 4 days worth of black before the mother of pearl even got epoxied in. And then we got about 3 to 4 days of clear coat, sanding in between those coats, sanding and letting it dry, clear coating it, sanding it, letting it dry, sanding it, etc., etc. So now it's so, even if I had to come in here and start doing some block sanding, do not start sanding this with your hand, because you'll end up you'll have too much compression in certain areas. You would only want to do just a very ginger amount of block sanding in order to get everything leveled out. So I'll leave those on just for the moment. Oh, see, I did have a pencil line drawn on the tape as well. So it's like a Gibson, man. You can't put serial numbers on your guitars. If you're doing a restoration, that's where you'll get in trouble. And you'll also get in trouble if you're doing fakes. So don't do that. Don't have to. And it's funny, there's a part of me, I try to say this and not sound arrogant, but if you do this type work long enough and you start looking at these historical guitars and you find all of the unbelievable flaws, but you consider the fact that they are a production company. They're not trying to build a pro level touring guitar from every guitar that comes off their assembly line. They're trying to make money. They're trying to make payroll. They're trying to keep their board of directors from firing them and stuff like that. So you got to do the best you can with what you have to work with, but also make a little bit of money. America, man, what's left of us. Now it's funny for all you guys that are international. Um, most people, what you would see on the news, it's nothing like what's going on here in the States. This is truly a great country to live in, and there's very, very, if any, I don't really even. I grew up in the South, and I never remember any racial strife at all, ever, ever. Even back in the early '70s. So whatever you might be hearing online, and if anything, it's kind of boring here in the States. It's a pretty docile place to live, especially where I live here in the South. And my great, great distant grandfather actually homesteaded the town that I live in. So um, it's pretty cool to have that heritage that far back to the late 1700s was when they came over from Ireland, which was from County Cork, is where I would hail from. So if there's any of you guys from Ireland out there, especially County Cork, chime in and let us know. That'd be cool. I haven't got to visit Ireland, but I will one day. Okay, so now I'm being a little anal retentive there about everything. But let's see if it's flat. Where's my block? Nice and true. Perfectly true, perfectly flat, nothing funky going on. We got a beautiful center line still, and dimensionally, everything about this, I know beyond a shadow of a doubt that the edge of that piece of maple right there is the very, very edge of the custom, the finished custom profile is right at the very edge. So I know that would be one reference point, but that's irrelevant because I will literally be routing off a solid, probably close to 3/16 of an inch. So everything about the actual profile that you see here, yeah, this will be a good video. Because I was thinking about this before I did the start of the video, and I better watch the time because I'll end up going over. Okay. I checked it to see if it was consistent, and it's not. But this is the 59 Les Paul profile, and basically once the custom is routed down to receive all the binding, it will be virtually almost identical to the actual 59 headstock. So there'll be an enormous amount of material coming off this black. So now that's no excuse to try to cut it too close, but it'll end up basically being about that much right there. Not down here, but up here especially. So you can see where if you tried to use a 59, you would go too far. But it's pretty darn close up here. So I doubt they were thinking along those lines, but we know now that we've got this beautiful flat surface. Now I'm ready to go over to my miter saw and just ease a little bit of length off here and square that up with this back wall back here. Flip it around, and well, what I'll be doing is clean that end off, start cleaning that end off back up to a predetermined point that I punched through with a perforated punch like I showed you in the first video. So I know that if I went over there with my miter saw and if I tried to cut all the way up to that point right there, it would be game over, because that point goes beyond the highest point or the peak of the open book. So you would only want to trim off a little bit up here. But I want to start squaring it up so that now I've got something to either go ahead and epoxy down to the overlay. I mean, I don't know why I keep calling this overlay, or I was calling it fretboard a while ago. And one way to do it would be just epoxy that down, then go to your table router with a face bit bearing on the top, machine that off, and then file that nice and clean. Then take your change your router station over to whatever bit, the rabbet that needs to cut out for the binding, and do everything on the table top router. And that may very well be how I do it, because you want to be real careful here trying to like take a jigsaw and cut this out perfectly finished. It just all depends on whether I want to have this epoxy glued on here and then machined out to receive the binding on this neck. And I got to tell you, that's a real easy way to do it, because I could now put this in some sort of clamp low on my workstation leg, and then I'm literally just working everything. I'm just working everything like this right here. It's directly in front of me, and I'm keeping an eye on everything as I'm doing my binding and my tape work and all that jazz, or a little bit of trim work with a file and stuff like that. So it's really intriguing, and it's a lot of fun to. That's roughly about where it's going to be. That should be really beautiful. Oh, look at that. Look how close I am. How's that for rockabilly? Ought to be nice. All right, I'll probably end the video right there. Again, I wish I could get into the whole showing you how to do binding, but when I'm doing binding work, I really need to be focused on that, because I don't do binding every day, and it takes me a while to get back in the saddle. So it probably has a tap tone. You definitely can hear it. There it is. So there's the difference. Nice tap tone. Once it's epoxied down to the lower, it will sound incredible. So if there's anybody from Cork, Ireland, or Sheffield, England, chime in and let us know. So I appreciate you guys dropping in, and I'll see you in the next video. And this weekend, I'm going to fire back up the Les Paul builds, and this is just so beautiful. Both of the Les Pauls are going really well, but I haven't had a chance to do any videos for them because I was so wound up getting this one back on point. But what is that? That's a 59. It's actually my 59, because I spread the low E and the high E about 1/8 of an inch further apart, 1/16 on this side, 1/16 on this side, but I hold a fairly close taper. Oh, there's time. Getting close. We're still up there, but I hold fairly close to the authentic, true 1959 headstock. Very petite. This is going in the 73 gold top for Chip in North Carolina. And Chip, if you're watching, I need to give you a shout and chat with you a little bit. But you were really cool about saying you weren't in a hurry. But I know that if you needed to talk, that you would have given me a call. But your job is going really well, and it's absolutely 100% fit to your body, ready to be glued in. And even that, where's your overlay? Oh yeah, here's your overlay. Check the time. We probably got 1 or 2 minutes here. I won't extend it too long. But you saw how I had that. There's the other mahogany wax paper. I've already had this out, and this one was a little bit proud. I did have to sand on it a little bit. I know what I forgot to mention. I've got so much clear coat nitrocellulose lacquer built up on here that even once I start sanding off this and feathering out and getting rid of some of that epoxy black squeeze out, I will drop down until I hit my clear nitrocellulose lacquer, and then I will have a really beautiful finished job. And I'm glad I thought of that, because that would have been a mistake. Because if you look at that right now, that's unfinished. That's the first time I've seen it. So that's unfinished. You have your epoxy squeeze out right there that you've got to sand that down until you get back to your nitrocellulose lacquer clear. And then you're continually watching your sandpaper as you're doing that sanding work, guaranteeing yourself that you do not want to see any black. If you hit that point to where you see black, you better stop right there, because you're about to go through the black and get to the maple, and you're a lot closer to the maple than you realize. Okay. So 2 very cool guitars coming together all at once. Actually 3, along with Jerome's. And I have not done Jerome's headstock overlay yet, because I need to talk to Jerome about his 69 and determine, and if you're watching, Jerome, whether you truly want to stay with the large headstock or possibly drop down to the small headstock. You don't have to make that decision right now. We got plenty of time. And I shouldn't have even brought that up, but I did want to show those 2 guitars, or those 2 different profiles, and how you're working with your, see how proud that is sticking up on the back. Now when I machine this down to chips headstock, I will be machining out that Gibson location plus a little bit. And on this one, I'll be drilling down some relief holes, and to allow any epoxy squeeze out to kind of fall down into the headstock a little bit. We'll cover that in the 73 Les Paul Gold Top Restoration. But they're virtually the same, but there are some differences that you have to consider as you're doing these jobs. I'm going to try to get the table set up so that I'll have something to do a screenshot and end the video there. So I appreciate you guys dropping in. And hell, that thing's sitting over there. It looks awful. I got too much in my hands. All right, let's see what that looks like on camera. It's over an hour. That's what it looks like. Appreciate you guys dropping in. I'll see you in the next video.